where are we? There's a great deal of conversation about the protest, about what has happened since the protest, and about the violence that took place last night. A man came forward, Tyrone Harris Sr., saying that his son, Tyrone Harris Jr., was the young man that was shot. He remains in unstable critical condition, and many of us are waiting to hear what the details are. Demonstrations and memorials took place all across the country this weekend to mark the anniversary, and there was an event that kicked off with a peace concert. Michael Brown Sr. spoke at a gathering of 200 people at a parade that started out where Mike Brown was shot. Unfortunately, what's grabbing headlines now is the shooting from last night. And so joining us on Skype is Senator Maria Chappelle-Nadal. On the panel is Paris Denard, Legislative Director of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, Lauren Victoria Burke, Managing Editor of Politic365.com, and Dr. Cleo Manago, Behavioral Expert and CEO of the Black Men's Exchange. So brothers and sister and Senator, there is more than enough for us to be able to go over this morning. And so I want to be able to talk about the commemoration, but I can't do that without talking about what happened last night. And so, Senator, I want to come to you first. Can you tell us a little bit more than what we're hearing from the Washington Post story and what we've gotten from other networks as it relates to what happened on the ground last night?
Yes, I have to tell you that there is a person who has been on the ground. I know them simply by their handle on Twitter, Mr. Swag, and he literally yelled out again and again to the police officers after the person fell to the ground after being shot to save his life. And he yelled and he yelled and continued to yell for that recovery. And after that, that person was retained at the police station right now. And because of that effort, the person is still alive. Mr. Harris is alive right now, and he is in critical condition. We don't have a lot of facts. And so it is very hard for me to make some opinions. The only thing that I can say for sure is that we need to look at what the police chief is saying and be very critical of some of those things.
Well, let me ask you about one of those things, because one of the things that I was most concerned about was this notion that there were there were officers in plain clothes and officers in a unmarked vehicle. That seemed to me the most suspect aspect of what we heard from last night, especially in lieu of what's happened over the course of the last year. Why would you have plainclothes officers in unmarked cars when you're attempting to ensure that there's order of any kind?
That's exactly right. And, you know, we haven't heard of this story before. I do know that the different agencies changed the game a little bit because they wanted to maintain a certain level of peace. But what's critical in all of this analysis is at the time when police officers were trying to get people to disperse, it is very dangerous to have unmarked cars and police officers who do not have identifiable information on their body. So that presents a danger in itself, especially at a critical moment like that in an intersection. And so there were a lot of people who were already out that evening. Crowds were building. I had just left the Cornell West event that was at St. Mark's Church, and I knew that something was strange because crowds were building, but I couldn't isolate what was going on. When I got home, I started getting a lot of the reports from people who were on the ground, also trying to make sure that we were all in a safe position. But there were some people who were still on the ground and very adamant about making sure this young man, Mr. Harris, was in a position where he could be saved. We know time and time again, because of video, that there have been people who were shot who could have lived, but police officers decided not to recover them. So I am very happy that Mr. Swag, of course, he has a handle and a name, but we know people by their handles in this circumstance because Twitter is our news at this point.
Senator, thank you so much. I appreciate you joining us this morning. I want to go to the panel. Dr. Manago, if you can chime in for me a little bit here.
Well, I have a question for the senator. Does this 1 year later anniversary shooting that's possibly lethal Mark, that there's been little change? And to contextualize my question, I know that you have a new police chief there. I'm from Los Angeles, and after the Rodney King incident, we got a new black police chief as well, but nothing systemically changed. So I'm wondering if we're in the same boat. I also heard that the tickets, the frequency of tickets being written to black folks there has not changed. Black people are still bankrolling the civic system there. So what is going on in the year, given those issues and whatever else you can come up with?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you that legislatively, not much has changed. We are still being oppressed every single day, and there are people who are in the rank and file who think that having the court reform is the simple answer for the hurt and the pain and frustration that people experience every single day. It's a cover-up.
What
It's
about this
smoke
new
and
chief?
mirrors.
What about
the
this
new chief? He is from Glendale, Arizona, and I do know that in Glendale there are only 4% African Americans in that location. So having a community that has 70% African American is very different for him. I do know that when there was an event 2 weeks ago, Alicia, who was trampled on by police officers, the chief was very upset about that situation. He has been in conversations with people who have been wronged by his own police department at this point. And in that circumstance, the only one to this point in a year, it was the first time a person was apprehended and released in the same night. So I'm very thankful, I'm very hopeful, but we still have to be critical. Just because he is African American does not mean that he is going to be the asset that we need on the ground. We have seen African American police officers chokehold other African Americans, so we really have to look at his actions in order to have.
Senator, I got to cut you off there for a second. We got to take a break. We're going to be right back. Where does Ferguson go from here? We're talking about it. We're going to continue the conversation after the break. Plus.